Hi, it's George Bowson here in the Flow of Life Community Conversations with the most beautiful, lushly haired lady, Jacqueline Hollows, Mama J. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, Georgia.
We had a conversation about hair before we got on here. Otherwise, that probably made no sense at all.
Yeah.
So, do you know what came to me to start asking you about was you've worked or do work with really people who start with a really tough background, who obviously beyond recovery have been in prison, incarcerated in whatever form. And I'd love to hear how you see as they fall out of where they've spent so long looking, how you've seen their creativity, what they have access to change, because it must be fairly huge, I would imagine.
Yeah. Oh, great question. Yeah. I think what's interesting is for all of us, because we can all be in a prison in our mind, can't we? So we can all be trapped by thought and insecurity and ego and so on and squish that natural innate creativity. And in a way, that's exactly the same.
Mm.
The circumstances might be different and the things that they're thinking about might be different, but it's the same. And absolutely, when you see people wake up to that they're not who they think they are, all sorts of other things come forward,
Yeah.
things that they're not expecting and things that they never even thought about. And a really sort of simple example is Derek Mason, who's, you know, a speaker and a facilitator in his own right. All he saw initially was that he was a career criminal, and all he saw was, I don't have to do crime. That's it. He didn't know what he was going to do,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't know how that was going to manifest. But all he knew was, oh, I don't have to do crime. And that, even when he got out of prison, that alone was enough for him to know there's something else. And then when you start looking to the something else, which is in the unknown, which is not something that you've maybe even thought about before, the natural creativity comes forward and bubbles up. And so, yeah, now he's writing a book, he's putting together webinars, he obviously facilitates and runs groups and mentors and does all of these amazing things, all from that space. And then another example is Paul Locke, who was a facilitator with me in the early days, who one day said, I think I'm going to buy a canvas. Bought a canvas and a ton of paint materials, and now he's an artist selling art around the world, having exhibitions, you know, running his own, got his art hanging in galleries, got his art hanging in Norway and all these different places that he's selling for thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
And he'd never picked up a paintbrush before in his life.
How interesting, because actually I follow him on Instagram and I knew that he came from the 3P understanding, but I didn't know where he came from. So, and in fact, I asked him if he'd come on here, but I gather that he's really kind of up to his ears at the moment. So unfortunately he couldn't. But and that makes sense because I don't know if you followed him recently, where he started talking to a guy on the street corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so fascinating. The gentleman, and I can't remember his name now, it was there and now it's gone. Was it Philip? I can't remember anyway, who had such amazing wisdom and kindness and light from his soul that he saw even though he was sitting in dirty clothes, hungry, homeless, on a street corner.
Yeah.
And that was really beautiful to see. And then to see how Paul responded to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another good point, actually, because I grew up to think of creativity as being something that other people were. Other people are creative. I can't paint, I can't write, I can't.
Yeah.
And I remember a long time ago, pre this understanding, someone, I said that I was not creative, not visual. I said, I'm not visual, and so I can't be creative. And he said, wow, well, how did you put your outfit together?
So simple. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, it's such a simple, it's there every day. Like every day we're going, not everybody, but some people are going, does that go with that? And what jewelry shall I wear? And how should I do my makeup and my hair? And, we're not, which color hair suits me? And generally speaking, I mean, like not always, but generally speaking, most people are conscious of some sort of style for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, that's being creative. And then he said, but you're a business person. You're creative in your business.
Mm.
And I thought, oh yeah, of course. I haven't worked for someone for over 12 years. I've worked for myself. So I'm constantly creating opportunities and connections and programs, and business evolves and changes and all of that. I never saw any of that as creative until that moment. And that started to open my eyes to, we're all more creative than we think.
Mm-hmm.
And back then I would have said, I can't write. Yeah, I'm not a writer. I can't write.
Hold on. Have you ever written a letter?
There you go. Or an email, or anything really. And what I realized is there's a couple of things that block us. So first of all, there's the whole school thing. If you don't, I remember when I was told I was tone deaf at school, so that was it. I didn't sing anymore. And so there's that, the sort of what we take on from our childhood and our schooling and everything, but we never reevaluate. We never sit down and go, well, where am I at now? Maybe that was true when I was 5.
So flipping true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Where am I at now? Could I would say that I can't draw. And for years, on and off, I've picked up, drawing books and done little bits of drawing. And then I got really into this thing called the bullet journal. And I really got into it. And it's a sort of productivity reflection way of making a to-do list. And because it's in my bullet journal, sometimes when I'm reflecting, and I just draw and colour and create on the paper. And that helps me to just process in the background without, thinking. And through that, I mean, I'm never going to win awards for it, but, I've drawn butterflies and snails and I design covers and I do that sort of thing. And I get a deep joy out of it. And of course, that's creativity. That's looking at your materials and creating something out of it. And the third thing is, because we think we're not creative, so we don't do it, so we don't get better at it.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I mean, the block is there that this wonderful little mind goes, oh no, we don't go there, because it might be judged not this, not that, the other. And we're the ones that make the judgment beyond even it getting outside of us. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And back to Paul. Paul didn't buy those paintbrushes and create a piece of art that sold for thousands of pounds to a person in Norway. He bought those paintbrushes, he played, he tried things out, he kept going, he found he liked it, he developed a technique, he kept going, etc. You know, and now here, 7-8 years later, whatever it is, now he's creating stuff that is going out there into the world and selling and so on. But we have this expectation that it'll be now, you know.
Yes.
I'll learn to paint. Oh, I can't do it. Or I'll learn to paint, and in a week I'll sell a piece for £10,000.
Yeah, no, it's potty. I mean, the interesting, many decades ago, I went to an Italian fine art teacher, and he would do something, and his way of teaching people was get them to copy it. So it was critiqued to the finest point. So everything that I produced was about his critique, not about my pleasure. So I stopped painting. I finished with him in the end because actually it didn't give me pleasure. And then many decades later, I started painting again, and it's not fine art. It isn't anything to do with anybody else or anybody else's judgment, other than, oh, I like that. And the whole experience is so totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not to say, though, is it, that if you want to be technical, or you want to produce a, so I write for a prison newspaper. I write a monthly column for a prison newspaper, and I have a certain amount of words, and I have to do a certain style that we've agreed upon. And you know, I have some restrictions and so on. So I have to work within some parameters, and I have to deliver to a deadline.
Yeah.
So when I sit down to write those pieces, there are way more restrictions and parameters than if I'm just freestyling and, you know, writing a story on a train or something. So I think that there is a place for that. Or I hear what you're saying. You're saying that squished your creativity because it wasn't pleasurable. You know, you're constantly living up to somebody else's standards, and then that squished it. But actually, once you find that groove, you could now go back to that and have a different experience.
Oh, totally. Yes. I mean, if I went back to him now, it would just be, the difference was then, of course, I took it personally.
Yes, brilliant.
And that's the difference. Whereas now, of course, I'd go back and just understand it was nothing about me. It's only about what has appeared on a canvas.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Nice.
And it's like anything, as you described, your limitations and restrictions of producing your letter, it hones you to a different skill.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that. I love that I have to do that type of work there, and that's a different skill. And I've been doing that now. I think the last piece was number 28, so 28 months. And the skill of coming up with something every month and meeting a deadline and so on. And sometimes we get put off by those things, but I find that it's all a game.
Yes.
So you know, if I miss a month, I miss a month. I mean, I might get kicked out the paper, but you know, so I don't miss a month because I don't want to get kicked out.
Yeah.
But I see it as, oh right, okay, here's some different rules for this part of the game. And by me learning those rules and honing my skill to that means that I can write in different styles. I can use my writing ability in different ways, you know, from the person who didn't think they could ever write, here
Yeah.
I am now.
Who is now a published writer. No, don't forget to put that one in.
Exactly, you know, and writing for different things, doing creative writing, writing memoir, writing for the prison thing, writing on a blogging platform. Once you uncover the fact of creativity, then the rest is just playground, isn't it? That's the same as I you know, my husband loves using watercolor when he paints, but actually he's quite happy then to mess about with acrylics. There's different rules around acrylics, you know, by the nature of it. So that's the same thing. So he has to do it differently, whatever that is, because I don't paint, so I don't know. But there are parameters in everything that we do. But once you unlock the fact that you're creative, you stop seeing the parameters as barriers, and you see them as things that are going to help you learn.
As playthings.
As
Which, of course, as a child, I mean, anything is just something to play with. I mean, I went to a girlfriend the other week, and her 9-month-old daughter thought my glasses were just awesome to play with, because they were just something new and unknown. And so there's no limitations, as you say, to what's playable with.
Yeah.
But of course, as we grow up, we make all sorts of utter madness up about what's playable with and what isn't, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we don't review.
Yeah, actually, that is such a relevant point, because we don't, but the same way, when we've started to uncover ourselves, we actually don't tend to go give ourselves a hug and say, do you know, actually, you've come so far. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Because so often we're so busy looking on to what's my next insight, or my next enlightenment moment, or my next nirvana, whatever.
Yeah.
As opposed to just going, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the girls in my mentoring program played this game of her daughter didn't like school, and she was, you know, banging her head against the brick wall trying to help her daughter. And then she thought, well, what about if you didn't hate school? What about if you liked school? You know, what shall we try that on? Would you be willing to wear that? And she said, no, I'll wear what didn't she like? There was something that she didn't like. You know, I don't like cooking. I'll try liking cooking. And she started to realize, actually, all the things that I think that I don't like or I hate, maybe they're all up for grabs. Maybe I can review, you know, maybe do I still hate it? Is this true now? Or have I just taken that on? And anyway, she was walking the dogs or doing whatever she was doing, and she came home and she had a banana, and she finished the banana and she went, I used to hate bananas. So, without realizing, of course, a ton of thought about what she hates, all her preferences had fallen away, and then a very thing that she thought she hated, she was there eating without even thinking about it. So I thought that was really good, because it made me realize, yeah, like, what do I think that actually I've never challenged? You know, I haven't challenged in X amount of years. And is it true now? And could I look at it again and think, well, maybe I'll give that a try, or maybe I just, whatever, you know, like play with it. Play with it. We don't have to take everything so seriously, right?
Definitely. So do you just work in men's prisons, or do you work in women's prisons as well?
No, yeah. Right now we're not working in any prisons because COVID
It's
mucked
still
everything up.
Yeah.
But no, we've worked in men's prisons and women's prisons, yeah, and all sorts, different categories and so on, yeah.
And it's interesting from the point of view, have you found, even though we're all the same thing underneath all of this, a difference in how actually, just as a woman, working in a women's prison or working in a men's prison, how they view you and have responded to you? Kind of in the
Interesting
outside.
question. So I was more nervous about working in a female prison than a male prison. And of course, a lot of that came from thinking that they would judge me. You know, thinking that I wouldn't fit in, bit old school day sort of thoughts, you know, I wouldn't fit in and all of that. And I was aware that that's what I was doing. But actually, working with the women is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Working with the men is sometimes heartbreaking, but mainly fun and sometimes challenging. But there's a different dynamic. And what I found with the women is you can't imagine. So there was a woman I worked with, an Asian lady, very beautiful Asian lady, all dressed all properly. And she learnt English in prison. She was a arranged marriage and subjected to years and years of abuse. And in their culture, she couldn't tell anyone. And if she did tell anyone, they just told her to, you know, get on with it.
Woman, get on with it, yeah.
And so she killed her husband. As you do.
Clearly. But you can understand that, because if you've kept down that long.
I know, absolutely. I know I was laughing then. It just seemed like completely mad to say that out loud. But absolutely is that eventually that looked like the only option. She couldn't speak English. She had no friends. She couldn't talk to her family. She was abused and badly treated. And at some point she's gone, there's only one way out of this. And so she killed her husband. And so she went to prison. And then she's in prison in England. She can't speak English. And so she learned English, and she's really good cook. So she, you know, made friends by cooking for them and so on. And she found friends, and she was the happiest in prison than she'd ever been in her life. And that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
But there's also there's a beautifulness to this.
There certainly is. Yeah, there certainly is. And that's what I saw, is that if you can find happiness in a prison, you can find it anywhere, right? You can find peace in a prison. You can find it anywhere. So it's not the circumstances. The circumstances are just the things that get moved around. It's where you are. And she found peace within herself for what she did. She's reunited with her children, and there's not forgiveness yet, but there's, you know, a willingness to understand what went on and so on. But it really showed me as well the need for this sort of understanding to go into those communities. And you asked me about the difference, and the difference is that I guess with the women, I felt as though there were many more barriers. There were many more circumstantial things that kept them down or kept them trapped. And so freedom to them and finding their own peace of mind and freedom was even more powerful, because once they saw that, they realized that this made up society and this made up world can't possibly keep them down. And that made a difference to them.
Well, of course, our society, conditioning, call it whatever you will, it's been so long that kind of in the feel of women are just complex.
Yeah.
As opposed to actually, and maybe we are complex, but maybe that's also the fact that women tend to look deeper,
Mm.
deeper into themselves. Because I mean, I don't know about you, how many courses, whether it's healing, three principles, Reiki, NLP, I mean, you name it. I mean, there's a whole world out there. How many women are doing those courses?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And that must say something about how women feel insecure or lacking about themselves. But that's still kind of generational stuff, maybe still playing through.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't like to assume that that's why women do those courses, because it could also be that women are the carers and the nurturers, and so they do things that they think can help the world more so because they're more, I don't know about more, but maybe that's the reason why. So I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Isn't it? I mean, if I say from the point of view, I mean, I know I hear so many people in our understanding go, I've had enough of trying to fix me. And this
Yeah.
meant I saw I didn't need fixing any longer.
Yeah.
Because that was just that wonderful creative power of the universe. That
Yeah. I mean, everyone's different. And I worked with high risk prisoners, so people who've committed sexual offences and some of the more horrific offences. And they're another different category of people. They're complex. They're usually very difficult backgrounds, lots of early childhood trauma, they're much more insular, they're much more and they're psychologized, whatever they're analyzed to death.
Yeah.
To death, they're analyzed. Go, tell me again, tell me how you felt, tell me why you did that, tell me what happened. They have to talk through their crimes so often that actually they get to a point where they just tell it, like, oh yeah, I picked up this water bottle and then I went and did that and I threw the rubbish in the bin. They just tell it as if it's nothing. And then they get labeled that they have no victim empathy. Well, actually it's because they've had to repeat their story so often, and it's been probed and probed and probed, that it doesn't mean anything to them anymore. Or they don't want to go to those feelings anymore. Again, I did that work with Paul Locke, and one of the groups afterwards, we realized they had to do this special program called the Sex Offenders Treatment Program, it was called, SOTP. And it was this 6 months intense program where the intent was that you break people. So you spend 4 months breaking them and then you rebuild them. So you break them they're crying.
Awful.
And that still goes on. They have to be told, this is what I think of you, this is what I feel about you, this is how you make me feel. And then when they're totally broken, then they can build their new you. So when we found out that the people on our program were going on to this other program, we were horrified. It was barbaric, right? And I said, what, well, how do they respond? You know, what happens? And the workers, the support workers said, oh, well, they often, you know, self-harm and drink and, you know, they go off the rails a bit and all of this. And, you know, that's part of the process. And I was like, isn't it obvious that that's just
That's
not
not working.
right?
Yes.
And but they, you know, the whole of the staff were of the mindset that when the person's is broken, and because they can't be fixed, right? That's what they thought, they can't be fixed. And so when they're broken, then we can rebuild them again. So it's just part of the process. It doesn't matter that they self-harm and try to kill themselves and drink and score drugs. And anyway, that program, you'd be glad to know, was eventually banned.
I'm not surprised.
It was found to actually increase the potential of people reoffending rather than decreasing it. Again, no surprise.
Again, yes, absolutely.
And but what was really interesting is we had a lad who was on that program, and he was distraught, and I reminded him about where his feelings come from. And he said, so when I'm doing the program, I get very, very emotional, and you know, it's horrible. I said, yeah, well, it would be. But why is it horrible? And he said, because I'm reproducing the scenes in my mind. Oh, he said, oh, I'm reproducing the scenes. They're not happening to me right now. So I'm creating that like a movie. And I said, yeah, that's right. Like a movie. So it doesn't matter how distraught you are when you're telling that story, you know where that's coming from. So when you walk away, you can actually be okay still.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of Jules's program.
Yes.
Because Jules
Yeah.
encourages you to go to the trauma, use the trauma as your paintbrush. Well, she doesn't say that, but you know, use your experience as your palette. Because you can go into your experience, you can pour your heart out onto the paper, you can literally feel the emotion into the writing, and then you're okay because it's not actually happening to you. So you know that, but you dip into the well for inspiration, for the palette, like I say, you know. And I thought, yeah, that's right, isn't it? It's not that, because for me, I was like, you know, pre-principles and post-principles. Right? And pre-principles, I'd sort of gone, oh yeah, I don't do that anymore. I don't think about that trauma. I don't think about those hard things that happened to me, or those, you know, those terrible things. I don't want to think about that. But actually, I don't need to, you know, I'm over it. But actually, now I realize I can go there, and I can allow myself to totally go there and be.
It's your compost.
It's my compost, yeah, and be there.
Yeah.
And then I can, you know, clean up at the end of the day and go to bed.
I know when I first started with writing with Jules, I found it really hard to put I on the page, because of course there's kind of that safety thing of this is how I'm, what comes to me, of if I don't put me on the page, I'm, you know, if you're one step away, you're always safe, aren't you? And but I do get what you say. It was really difficult when, you know, going back to experiences that, as you say, from this understanding, we go, we don't need to look there. That isn't healthy. That's just not where we go. And it takes a little while, and to know that actually you are safe to go there, roll around in that compost, get your earwigs in your ears, and know that actually as you put that pen down, oh, I'm done with that again.
Yeah.
Maybe I need it another time.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much more freeing is that?
Oh, no
Because then
comparison.
yeah, no comparison, no comparison. So that really changed for me. And actually, just thinking about that now, that's making me realize that, when people say, oh, yeah, I'm glad these things that happened to me because, they make me who I am. Well, yeah, actually, these things they were the compost that grew me. And,
Yeah.
and here I am, and I'm able to draw on that experience and to use it in my life without it being harmful to me now. I don't have to block it off. It's an accidental thing that we do, but yeah, that's I mean, all of these explorations of our own self and our own creativity enable us to see things differently. Writing with Jules, I'd been working in the prison for 4 years or 5 years before I started writing in 2019, and writing with Jules enabled me to learn again and to see again and to experience life differently again,
Mhm.
and to put onto the page and to go to the beyond and see what's going to come through me today.
I mean, I don't know about your experience, but in these writing exercises, it very much so often came that it was me, in the greater sense of me, coaching myself.
Mm,
That so often when you went back to something, something cleaner came out of it.
right. Yeah. Well, I discovered something different.
Okay.
I discovered a dirty little bint. I discovered a very dark side. So
Yeah.
I'm quite sweetness and light, I'm bouncy, I'm jolly, I'm optimistic, usually smiling, which is why all the men come on the group, because they go, who's this smiling person? Um, and and that's my sort of vibe. And I've always hidden my darker vibe from the world. And what I discovered, my husband, sometimes he thinks, oh, what has Jules done to you? Because what I discovered was my darker self came through my writing,
Yeah.
and and is very there. Like I wrote a story on the train the other day, and I don't even think I can publish it, and it's sprinkled with
Oh, wow.
experience, it's sprinkled with
Yeah.
um and it's pretty dark. And I discovered this darker self, and at first it was a bit perturbing
Mhm.
because it was like, who am I, who is this? And but now actually I love it, because I feel that I've embraced the dark side of me, and that makes me more three-dimensional,
Yeah.
because it was always there. It was just, that's the bit I kept hidden from the world, and now that comes out more. But now that was necessary, because Paul Lot painted my portraits in another room, and I hated it.
Mm.
Absolutely hated it when I saw it. I saw it on the phone, to be fair. I didn't see it in its glory, and I didn't want it. I turned it down. And I asked him about it. He said, it shows your strength,
Mhm.
and it's got gold leaf, so it's like angelic as well, but it's quite stern and serious, and it shows your strength, and it shows your depth. And anyway, I didn't like it, and Jules fell in love with it, and many people said, oh no, I love it, I love it. And eventually, I think maybe even 6 months later, I said, I think I'm ready to look at that portrait, but I want to see the live thing. He said, well, funnily enough, I've decided to send it to you.
Mm.
And because I want you to see the, I am, because he spent hours working on it. So he did send it to me. And when I opened it, I cried, because I really saw a different dimension of me in his work that was beyond what I see in the mirror or what I like to think I look like.
Yeah.
And it was all there, in the portrait. A bit like the Dorian Gray I just thought of then, but no, I'm getting younger and more beautiful, and my portrait's getting older.
We
But
know.
I realized that, that what you think you show to the world is not what really is on show.
Oh, yeah.
People know. So why not bring that out and embrace that and enjoy that? And I do enjoy my dark stories now, and I sort of I'm amused by what comes out. I don't know what's going to come out this session, because I'm doing something different, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
But it's fascinating, because so often people will say, oh gosh, you're this or this, and you go, what?
Yeah.
It's amazing actually that we see so little so often of
That's true.
actually what
That's
we are.
true. And I grew up being the party girl,
Mhm.
and and my whole strategy as a young woman was to not allow anyone to have expectations of me. So I constantly was the party girl and the fun girl, and then just hid myself away when I had my dark days and dark weeks, and drank too much and had too much sex and all of that stuff. And I remember this chap saying to me many, many, many years ago, "You're quite intelligent. Like, what? Why do you hide that?" And I say, I don't want people to expect anything of me. I've had all that. I'm fed up with disappointing people. I don't want anyone to have any expectations. Well, after that, I went on to do a degree in computer science and ergonomics, and then a master's degree in networking technologies. So clearly I wasn't stupid, which I'd grown up believing that I was. And then a more serious side came out. But when Paul created the portrait, he saw the woman that went into prison with this understanding and worked with hundreds of people and learned how the system worked, and got trained, it got key trained and security trained. And he saw that. He saw the entrepreneur, and the person with a heart of gold, but an iron steel going through her, that
Yeah.
get through and get over and knock down the obstacles. And what I realized then was I'd never reviewed myself. It's like, oh yeah,
I love that.
there I am.
Because of course the noise that continually plays, that voice in our head is all old, as you put it, unreviewed stuff.
Yeah.
Just is the past that made up.
Yeah.
And actually, so every time I had a thing recently where I was in a shit show in my head. And for the first time, we often talk about as coaches, sit in the feeling of it. And yet this wonderful, clever thing tries to self-soothe us so often. And this was, I can honestly say, the first time that I have actually gone, I know I have to sit in this horrible feeling. And the fact that in that horrible, crappy 3 weeks, I guess there was an unconscious review of going, is that true? Is that true? and in the coming out of it saw something wholly insightful about the nature of ego.
Yeah.
So we're most amazingly wonderful creative creatures, aren't we?
We really are.
Of our pain and our passion and our love and our...
Yeah,
It's wonderful, isn't it?
it really is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've all just got to do reviews regularly and see the truth of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That was beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. And
Oh,
thank you for your wonderful openness.
thank you.
And I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.